Okay, I think we should get started, shall we? Irina, are you our producer? Are you still hanging out somewhere else? We should have a producer, but I wonder.
Yes, I'm
Oh,
here.
great.
Thank you, Paolo.
Good morning, Irina.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Right. Do you have? I just go through the 3 or 4 slides, and you can introduce us, and then yeah, just keep going with my slides until we get to the demo, which is in an hour time more or less. So okay, today talk about there are 2 parts. We look at the agenda in a second, but it's basically the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and I would like to get from you what you know already in a second, and then Michel will present MVISION EDR. Right. Irina, you can.
Yes, thank you, Paolo. I hope that everyone can hear me well.
Fine.
Let me introduce you, Michael Delepper, who's leading the channel technical team at McAfee. I won't tell much more about him, apart from that what really made me curious that he has quite an interesting background in biology, geology, and he's a keen diver and snowboarder, but he's fully dedicated now also to the world of pre-sales, and really doing a great job enabling the whole McAfee channel. And Michael, if you want to, you can add something about yourself.
Yeah, and as you can see from the pictures as well, I have a 4-year-old son who keeps me awake at night and busy during the day. But yeah, living in Ireland for 11 years now. I'm Dutch by origin, but Ireland is home now. My wife-to-be is Irish. And I'm one of those weird people who made the jump from sales to pre-sales. The other way is quite common, but the jump from sales to pre-sales is less common, but
more challenging, definitely.
Yeah, and don't let that fool you. I actually do know. I have some technical skills, at least. Let me put it that way.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, Paolo. Okay, and Mr. Paolo Carney, that you have just had the pleasure to hear opening this session. Paolo is our information security technology consultant in Ingram, focusing and dedicated to McAfee. However, Paolo brings a huge experience into various cyber technologies, and he's on a mission to make the world a safer place. Paolo is a typical, I would say, a globetrotter, as he's lived on 2 continents and in 5 countries, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Well, you can correct me.
Yeah, no, that's correct so far.
Yes, he's currently residing in
we swap with Michael.
Netherlands with his beautiful wife and 2 amazing children. And Paolo is always curious about everything, and you will love the way he'll present technology, as he makes it really understandable for anyone.
Thanks, Irina.
Really here to help.
All right.
Thank you.
Right. Maybe the last slide for you, Irina, before I take over the agenda.
Yes, you already heard this notification, automatic notification from Zoom that this meeting is being recorded for future use. And if you're not comfortable with this session being recorded, you may leave.
We had to say that, like probably GDPR and what else. Right.
Sure.
Okay. Let's thanks, Irina. Let's get started with the agenda very quickly. So this is what we're gonna do. Again, it's two parts. The first session is about MITRE ATT&CK, and the second is really about MVISION EDR. So it's pretty much that's the split. Let's start with MITRE. So MITRE, believe it or not, I'll run a poll in a second asking you how much you know about it. But it's even a story in the making for years, really. I think it started in 2013. If I'm not mistaken. There's a slide that goes through the details, and it took a while for MITRE to make sure that people start to understand the benefits. But I think we're getting there. A lot of vendors, security vendors, are trying to kind of map their technology towards MITRE as a McAfee as well, as you'll see. But also a lot of customers are starting asking for that. How does this map with MITRE ATT&CK? And because of that, the time has really come to understand a bit more what MITRE ATT&CK is trying to accomplish and how it's trying to accomplish it, and see the value of it really. And so let me see if I quickly run a poll to understand who is on the call that knows about it, how much you know about it. So if you should be able to see on your screen, so a sort of, yeah, perfect. I ran the same poll on the event in LinkedIn, but probably not. It's just a subset of people here. So a little. Yeah, pretty much what I've, yeah, so let me just, we've got 6, let's see if we can get to 80% very quickly, but otherwise it doesn't really matter much. 75, 77, 79, last few seconds. All right, let's show it. Okay, so I have to share the results. I get too many clicks. So as you can see here, it's pretty much what I expected. We heard about it. Some people already know a lot, and I would like you guys to chime in and tell me, disagree, agree, reinforce the point, whatever comment you want to make. We all learn from each other in the end of the day. We are a small community of cybersecurity people. But some people heard about it, and a few people never heard, and that's okay. We're not going any deep in a deep level. I just kind of understanding what it is, where it comes from, where it's going, and what kind of value for our customer that provides, and that's basically what it is. Okay, so let's start to talk about what they're trying to achieve. This is the typical communication between a cyber threat intelligence analyst, either outside the organization or inside the organization. He says, I'll tell you this to the defender, to the incident response team, to the IT guys. And they have their own language. They say the adversary is using blah, 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 blah. And the first question comes to mind to the defender is, do we know and do we have anything to check this? And it is difficult to map. And then it loses precious time that cyber criminals they thrive on. So what ATT&CK is trying to kind of breach the communication like this. It says, okay, this maps to that. So the CTI analyst, instead of telling you its own verbiage, is trying to tell you, it will tell you in a way that says, this is what we mean. And then because the defender has mapped the technologies they have with the attack framework, then all of a sudden they say, oh, this is the tool we can use to check that information. So it makes it way easier and way faster, which is important to achieve that result. And of course, beyond the inside the organization, it also works the same across communities. There's a lot of threat intelligence shared with particular verticals, banking being one, but more and more are forming. So similar type of communication. Company A calls one way, company B calls another way, and sometimes they're referring, depending on the vendor they married with, they might just say, call it Cozy Bear, Fancy Bear, APT29. It changes, so it's difficult to understand what group we're talking about and what technique we're talking about. And once again, if they can both map to a common frame of reference, then it becomes, oh, this is what you mean. You mean the technique 1060. So similar conversations we had before. So this is kind of the value and the final goal that MITRE ATT&CK wants to achieve. So let's kind of go a little bit back and see what MITRE is. I didn't know it myself until I started researching. MITRE was founded in 1958, way before cybersecurity was a thing. And it's been always a US-based not-for-profit organization. And it's very famous, or at least the CVE and the CWE projects, and MITRE maintains these things. So it's been there for a while. It's not the first adventure they have with cybersecurity, as you can see. So in specific, what are the verbiage the MITRE use in terms of describing MITRE? It allows you to understand the behavior of the adversary, of the cyber criminal, or the group, whatever you want to call it. And it grew over time. It started with Windows only. Then they renamed it into Enterprise because they started adding networks, Linux, Mac, and now the cloud. So that was the first domain. But then over time, they also expanded to mobile devices, which have different set of techniques and tactics and objectives that cyber criminals try to achieve. And recently also ICS. If you want to monitor, share the chat maybe, because I see some people are posting stuff. And
I'm monitoring the chat.
oh, very good, thanks. So if there is something that you want to pose me for and answer a question or comment, just feel free. But this is the end goal. Some of you might know, because being around for a while, David Bianco's pyramid of pain, or pyramid of pain. What it means here is really when we focus on trying to detect something that is at the bottom of the pyramid, think about file hashes for malware, then it's very trivial for the attacker to change that. You can change the hash. You probably have done it in your own labs. Echo ABCD to this file. There you go. Hash values change. The file still works the same way, and then you need another hash. So if you stay at the bottom of this pyramid, it becomes very easy for attackers to do something different. But the higher up you go in the pyramid, it becomes a little bit harder. Think about network and understanding that host artifacts. Then I have to come up with something a little bit more creative to be seen as or to be unseen again, and so on and so forth. So the higher up you can start detecting cybercriminal activity, the tougher it is for them to change. Because think about a particular campaign that runs some particular tools, their particular methodologies and techniques. If you know all of this, they can't really improvise one day to another and change everything. They might over time, but it becomes very, very hard for them. And the idea of attack is try to talk and understand the attacker's behavior. So at the top of the pyramid, what is called tactics and techniques and procedures. That's what TTP stands for. If you stay at that level, if your technology can detect at that level, attackers will find much harder to be unseen or to progress their attack before getting getting counterattacked. So that's the idea behind it. So let's very quickly look about the timeline. So I was right, 2013, there was the first model, which was Windows only, but reality, it became public only after a couple of years. It was kind of inside the community. But in 2015, I didn't know. It was publicly released, and I got to know it a couple of years ago myself. I had hearing about it. And you can see the progress, and it's probably still in the making, right? We got here, we added sub techniques now to techniques, we keep adding stuff, and probably this is not going to stop. Because attackers unfortunately change their methodologies, change their tools and techniques, and new groups are come into being, and so on and so forth. So they try to keep pace with that. So this is kind of a screenshot of a couple of weeks ago, which might actually already have changed, maybe not, but of the tactics and techniques. So what you see here is kind of it's difficult to capture this in one screen because there's so many of them that it's impossible on that kind of, unless you have a huge monitor, to actually see. But I try to recap it underneath. So these are the tactics. So you can see, some of you might remember Lockheed's, I escaped my name because every vendor renamed it to the Lockheed kill chain attack kill chain. So you see, if you go from reconnaissance all the way down to impact, it kind of follows the same path. Unfortunately, the Lockheed attack kill chain didn't really provide a lot of meat behind that. It will allow you to understand the flow that usually cybercriminals use. Obviously, I recon, I get initial access, I try to achieve persistence, I try to escalate, and then eventually maybe stealing credentials, lateral movement, collection, command and control in between, and then eventually data exfiltration and impact, and so on and so forth. You see in brackets, there are the techniques that are at the moment included in the tactics. We're going to talk about a little bit later the difference between the two. The
cyber kill chain from Lockheed it's a really good tool to get a better understanding of how a particular attack works on a higher base level, whereas the MITRE ATT&CK framework really allows for a structured way of communicating what's happening in a certain stage of an attack, and it's understandable for everyone who's familiar with the framework. It's in my opinion, it's a better solution than the cyber kill chain.
Yeah, it has definitely more details. It left a lot of things unspoken, and then that created misunderstanding, talking about different things the same way or same way of different things, and so on and so forth. Let's kind of go deep down, a little deeper about what some definition. First of all, what attack means is this: attack, adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. Kind of a mouthful, but some of you might have already known that. So, what do they mean about tactics? Think about the why. Whenever a cyber criminal does something, they want to achieve a particular objective, and that's the tactics. So, you see at the tactic level, think about lateral movement. That's what they try to achieve. How they achieve it, it might be depending on the tools they find, on the group themselves, on their knowledge, expertise, and so on and so forth. However, the why, the reason is always the same. I try to move from your initial system to another system might be more appealing. Or I don't know, think about reconnaissance. Why do I do reconnaissance? They're always the same way. The way I do it is different, but why I do it is that. And that's the tactic. The technique is the how. So as I said before, the reason is probably one, but how to achieve that is the details. And the details are important for cyber threat intelligence teams because they can find whether this technique is being used in their environment, trying to map it to where, who, and where these attackers would be in their mindset. Procedure is basically a simple, a specific implementation of a technique by a particular group. I can give you some examples. APT28 use PowerShell to inject into lsass.exe to dump credentials. However, this is a particular implementation of the particular group using the particular tool, but PowerShell can be used, or you can achieve the same with another technique. And so it really depends. But it's important to a certain extent, understanding the procedure, because if you can map the technique to a procedure, you probably know the group is after you most of the times. And the group, of course, is the APT28, APT29, whatever it is, Cozy Bear, whatever you want to say. And the mitigation is also an important part of the attack tool set, is giving you some countermeasure you can use in order to detect and counterattack that particular technique, which is important, right? Because the security team need to understand, now what do I do? How can I do that? And we're going to talk about a bit more when we talk about the tools that these guys have. But let's give you an example.
Can you slightly go back here?
Yeah. Slightly go backwards. Is that enough?
Yeah, here. Yeah, this one. So what's really interesting here is that this perfectly reflects the way our industry has changed, right? Because roll back like 10, 15 years ago, everyone was talking about protection.
Yeah.
We're not anymore, because
I think less than 15. I would say probably 7, 8.
Yeah, right. It's protection is no longer the main focus. We realize now that protection is still important, and protection is very important. But at some point in time, it's going to fail.
Yeah.
So you need to know why it's happening. You need to know how it's happening, and then you can attribute it. But most importantly, you then put your security countermeasures in place, aka your mitigation. And the MITRE ATT&CK framework, how this works, really reflects how our industry overall has changed, right? No one expects a security vendor to offer you 100% protection. And if you do talk to a security vendor and they say we can offer you 100%,
no, they won't do it anymore. But they used to in the past.
If they say that, they're lying. It's simple as, right? So it's really important that the industry is now starting to understand, and customers are starting to understand how this works. And the MITRE ATT&CK framework really illustrates it. It's a really good tool to gain that understanding.
Yeah. Thank you. So let's give you an example how this fits together. There is a group you see on the top left, and then they use techniques. As we said, they use techniques to achieve a particular thing. However, and more and more the case now, they use a lot of ready-made tools. That the typical PowerShell is a particular example. They might use PowerShell that implements some sort of way to a scripted gets to a technique. So they might use either the technique directly or a software or tool to get there. And then they want to accomplish something, an objective, to go to the next level. And then the organization can prevent by having some prevent or mitigate or detect, at least depending whatever countermeasure they have. And this is an example. A PT28 uses a lot of mimikatz to do this time to achieve this objective, which is credential access. And this is a typical way of a PT28 does this. So whenever you have a group, you know that MITRE ATT&CK knows about how they behave, you can pretty be sure that this is the way they operate. So credential access usually is via mimikatz, which use this technique. And so if you find this in your environment, probably mimikatz is the tool. It could actually be a tool used by another group, by the way, because PT28 is not the only organization that use mimikatz. But you can try to kind of fill in the gaps of information that you're looking for by looking at the technique. And of course, if you want to prevent, one way to kind of understand and mitigate the issue is credential access protection. Just to give you an example, what you can find in the actual framework when you scroll down at the end to mitigation concepts. And this is what it means in practice. Sorry, Michael, is a FireEye screenshot. Doesn't matter.
Perfectly fine.
You can get anything.
Especially
but this
given
is
the recent news. Perfectly fine to use FireEye.
Exactly. Now, maybe there's gonna be some convergence between Fire and McAfee. Who knows? We'll see. But anyway, so the idea is you grab a report which is written by an analyst from a particular security vendor, and you try to map it to the actual attack, because then you start to understand what countermeasure you already have towards these techniques and what you need. So this is kind of goes through highlighting and say, oh, this means I can do some research, and this one is SOX 5 connection is a technique that is being described in a MITRE ATT&CK, and this might be another technique or another tactic, sorry. And then you can go down to the details, so you can try to map. And now, remember, ideally, organizations should be able to map their arsenal of cybersecurity tools towards techniques. And then you can see, do I have a hole here? Do I have to fill the hole? Am I okay with what I have today against this adversary and so on, or against this campaign, and so on and so forth? This is a typical example how a CTI team or an IT team, depending on organization, can go through to map these to attack. Some use cases and some limitations. So first of all, attack deals with this part of the blue part of this, from the delivery to the execution, and this maps very, very closely to the attack kill chain, if you remember it. But there's also a pre-attack that came up later, which deals with what happens before. And by recon, I don't mean network reconnaissance. I mean people looking at LinkedIn profiles, do other things that are kind of publicly available to understand a bit more about the organization. And believe it, there are companies that deal with that. They see a spike on particular activities on LinkedIn or Facebook or other tools, social media tools, and they can tell you someone is after you because there is a difference from the way you look at your profiles. But that's another story. Ideally, attack deals with the moment the attacker delivers a payload and he hits a machine, and then wherever they can go after that. Some use cases. A typical one is red teaming. So now I have a red teaming organization, or I have a partner to do red team exercise with me, and I can test it. Am I protected against this campaign? I know how the campaign works. Let's get the red team empowered to launch an attack using the same techniques that I know, and see how I fare, how I protect. And the other side is, do I miss some stuff? What do I detect? What can I protect against? What can I not protect against? Do I have holes that I have to cover? And these are kind of the two main use cases. So the red team knows what techniques to use, and the blue team can see how effective they are in responding before the real attack strikes. Also, it can also be used to measure the SOC maturity assessment. Again, it could be the partners, it can be the customer, depending on your organization. So you can judge whether the playbooks work, whether you've got the right type of visibility, whether you have the right level of response, the right speed, whatever it is you want to measure. And all these elements are important. And you get the SOC through a sort of a fire drill. I go through the whole process through a red team, and then let's see how quickly and effectively can we respond. And then an important part is what we talked about it, moving up the chain in the pyramid of pain to make sure that we understand behavior and we go beyond artifacts like hashes, IP addresses, even domains, and really understand the behavior of an attacker or used in a campaign to kind of make it more difficult for the attacker to reinvent themselves. Although over time they might do, and this is kind of the limitation of it. Some limitations that are spelled out quite clearly by MITRE ATT&CK is this is known adversary behavior as of today. APT28, I'm sure, is looking at what MITRE ATT&CK knows about themselves. It's counterintelligence in a way, and they might change over time. They might just, because there are new tools, new discoveries, new techniques, or just because they want to change the way they are perceived, they might over time change. Of course, MITRE ATT&CK can try to keep up with it, but don't take it as don't blame them if the APT28 never used the technique. Why is he using it now? Because they know we know. And it might also identify non-malicious behavior. Think about PowerShell. PowerShell is a tool that a lot of administrators are using. So it will likely also report, or it might detect PowerShell is blah, 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 blah. And you see in the demo that it's likely the PowerShell gets detected and flagged in particular ways by EDR. But remember, it's not the actual event that's important, but it's still the correlation of behavior. If you see a chain, that's what EDR should be about, or XDR should be about, to see a chain of events, and PowerShell is one element of it, but because of everything else is seen, then you're more certain that that's an issue. However, we also document legitimate stuff in attack, because on their own, they might not be a problem. And about sources, right? What attack is looking at all available sources, and by I mean available that are made available publicly through vendors, through whatever means. And finally, they try to infer other things they don't really have. Some things are disclosed by companies, some things are not. Some companies might decide a little bit less so than in the past because of new regulations, but you want to keep secret what you know because you don't want attackers to know what you do. It's a typical example of a Bitdefender. Remember, Michael? Saying, yay, we found a bug. Oops. And they fixed it. So there's always a fine line between disclosing information because what you're trying to achieve is trying to keep it for yourself as much as you can because you have an edge. And so there's always a disclosed versus inferred. Some information is inferred in the about the attack. Say, I'm pretty sure that we don't have proof for that, but I think they also use these techniques. So be aware of these things. Nothing things are 100% correct, but it's much better than not having anything. But there are some limitation. Users should be aware of it. So let's talk about users. I'm going very quickly because I want to leave some time for Michel to do the demo. I think we're doing fine. So actually, we're spot on. A couple of minutes late only. So how the counter and the cyber threat intelligence team can use attack really depends on where they are in their maturity. Organizations, some of them don't really have resources. They have their IT team try to also start their adventure on becoming, more proactive and whenever they can, and try to understand techniques and so on and so forth, which is the foundational level. I think they call it level 1 in attack, but for me, it's like the foundation, the beginning of the journey. Then hopefully some teams start to get more resources, more tools, or at least they get to mature a little bit, get a better understanding about techniques and tactics and adversary, and try to kind of become a bit more operational. And finally, there is a maturity level, which is called level 3 by MITRE ATT&CK, which are dedicated cybersecurity teams that with SOC and NOC and all the drills and the frills and all this, whatever they have to have. we are going to concentrate today, because of the discussion, the time, to level 1 and level 2 operations only. The mature level is probably, they probably don't need to kind of worry about it too much in this call. So level 1 teams, how should they use the framework? Well, they should try to understand, and there are, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Michel, but MVision Insights is actually a good tool for that, to try to pick what campaigns or what attacks are important for you. And it depends on two main factors. I would say three with luck or unluck, but I'll let it out. Your vertical, are you a bank? Are you a hospital? Are you, I don't know, shop, whatever? And your geography, because some attackers are more active, some campaigns are more active in particular geography than others. Pick one. Pick the one you're most worried about. Is it, I don't know, Cozy Bear? Is it this particular campaign? Start with something. Then use the attack to look at known behaviors. What do attack know about these techniques? Try to understand how this group or this campaign operates. And then have a look at, techniques. Do they use particular tools? Do they use particular techniques to achieve particular tactics? And then you have to collect data, unfortunately. And this could be done through a partner, depending on the size of the customer, but you have to have data. At the end of the day, now you know everything you're looking, you try to detect, you have to see the behavior if it's in your organization. A good tool to detect, to gather all this information is a CM. Of any sort. McAfee, I understand, also has a CM, but it doesn't have to be McAfee. But you have to have some sort of kind of general collector of information where you can run some analytics. So now find evidence. Do you have already this kind of behavior in your organization that you're missing at the moment? And then because of that, you have to do something about it. And then finally, look at how can I fix that? I think I can't really, the CM is reporting something, my protection layer is not able to connect, or I don't have anything in place. And we look at the attack navigator in a second to how to find out this, to get ready to be protected against particular campaign or group. So check out the attack resources. At the bottom of the page are mitigation techniques and so on and so forth. Have a look at resources they provide. What do you have to have in terms of technology to be able to be better prepared at it? Level 2 teams start a bit more mature. They understand a bit. Misha, you want to say something?
Yeah, so what we're essentially doing with a framework like this is you're looking at a specific campaign and you're looking at a specific number of techniques. And based out of those techniques, there will always be some result that's standard. So it's what we would call an indicator of compromise.
Yeah.
And we're looking, all of that data that we're looking at, whether it's a SIM or it's an EDR solution, or it's just some database somewhere where you're looking at, or you're comparing manually different tools, you're looking at indicators of compromise, because that's exactly what they are. They are an indicator that you are compromised. Are you then compromised? Not necessarily, but if you have 16 indicators of compromise and you see 14 of them back in your environment, it's a really good indicator that, hey,
I have a problem.
I have a problem because I'm hitting almost all of these specific indicators for this particular campaign. So the next step, of course, would be mitigation then.
Yeah, thank you. The only difference about the level 2 teams that they start more from their intelligence. They already been gathering over time and try to see if they can learn more about the particular group or campaign they might be missing today. That's in a nutshell what this is trying to say. So understand, this is what I know, but is there anything else I don't know? And probably I should expand my understanding of it. So that's the teams that are already working with this tool. Level 3 team, for the time and probably the scope of today's call, we're not going to cover. They also use it in an even different way. Okay, let's look at the tools before we stop for the demo. So there is a tool that I wish I could have the time to present, but I point out a resource in the slide that you can actually watch an excellent video made by the guys in MITRE that tells you about the attack navigator, what it does. But you see in the screen here, and we'll revisit this later when we talk about the detections. they did a comparison about two groups, APT3 and APT29. It's just an example. Forget about the rest. This is kind of what domain they're asking, looking about enterprise, mobile, whatever, because techniques and tactics are different. But what I want to point out here is the coloring of this chart here. And you see here, likely, I don't know the details, but likely this is the case. You've got, they mapped APT3 to, let's say, 1 as a value, and then APT29 as 2 as a value. And you see only 3 colors here because the others are not applicable. And then you can do a sum of the two layers on top of each other. And because of that, you can see where they intersect. So whenever this is purple, is a technique that is used by both groups. So why does it matter? Because you have to concentrate on low-hanging fruits. If I'm worried about these two groups, I have two choices. Either I implement some countermeasure for all these colors here, which sometimes you don't have the budget most of the times, or where do I have the low-hanging fruits? Where can I start to say, if I get the purple ones, I've got, you kill a bird, two birds with one stone. I kind of a bit harsh, but that's what I mean. This technique is used at the moment by both. So if I can make sure, if this is my worry, my biggest worry at the moment, I can make sure that I invest on technology on these purple ones, then I am more likely to be successful against both of them. Of course, you can always say, well, I can also probably, because of whatever reason, I can also think that this is important, but it will give you a way to understand if there are intersections. You can actually map more than 2. You can map 5, and then you can see the intersection with 5s, for example. You can also map campaigns, not only groups in the navigator. You see all of this in the video. It takes 10 minutes to run the video. It's very informative, it's very good. We don't have the time. But that's an important point to remember. If you're interested in finding out how this tool works, go to this YouTube video and watch it, because it's very clear, it's very effective. It's a free tool. They give you the link there. Go and play around and do what you want. Now, I wanted to close before the demo about talking about another tool, which is the evaluations. And so the aim of the evaluation is, well, there have been 3 rounds so far. They started 2018 and they do one every year. What they do, they pick a group, like APT3, for example, 2018. They look at all the tactics and techniques, and they simulate a full attack, a full life cycle attack, and they run this through some vendors in order to understand how effective vendors are. But by effective, I explain in a second what I mean. It's not really about winning or losing, but how can they respond? And then they said they did the same in 2019, and recently they did Carbonac and Fin7 evaluation, which I'm sure most of you have been through at least one webinar made by some vendors. I've been through a few myself, that they try to spin the results their own way. Fair enough, but they tell you the story. We're not gonna do that, by the way, on purpose, because if you want to find it, but this is not today's scope. The evaluation of this evaluation, I have 2 mainly aims. If you go back to why the attack framework is useful for organizations, it will tell you what techniques are covered by particular technology. Can I detect this? And does it matter? Yes. Well, it could. If I'm worried about this technique and I don't have any other tools, I will be looking for a vendor that likely is being able to cover this effectively. There are more shades to that, but that's the bottom line. And then, of course, the user interface. Like how easy to understand this result from the user interface. And this is probably the demo is going to hopefully give you some information about that. What is important, they also say it in their own small print, these evaluations are not a competitive analysis. And people confuse that, and a lot of vendors do. They try to say, oh, you were better because you score 100%. It doesn't matter. It's not about scoring all the techniques. What matters is the techniques you care, the techniques you're looking for right now for that particular tool. Does it cover what I need now, or what I'm worried about? So they don't really, on purpose, they don't publish anything that says Sentinel-1, McAfee, whatever, FireEye scored better than others, because there's not a comparison they try to achieve. They try to give you the element that you need to choose the right technique. And this is kind of, if you want to dig deeper, a couple of screenshots because they're kind of hidden. You go to find out the details of there's a here that is kind of very small in here, and that's where you actually can see the mapping, how techniques are mapped with vendors. And also you see again the attack navigator. You know the logic now. You see in this particular setting, Carbanak and Fin7 are two different. Correct me if I'm wrong. Are they groups or campaigns? Groups, campaigns. I don't know. I don't remember. One of the two. Anyway,
Sorry, what?
Carbanak and Fin7 are two different groups or two different campaigns.
Groups, yeah.
Okay. So they look at this group. You see again the intersection, the yellow one. So again, if I am worried about both of them or one of them, I pick the color that suits me most. And you see here the yellow means these techniques are used by both. So if I am in a finance sector and I'm worried about this, likely I'll make sure that at least the yellow ones are covered. So if I look at the vendor, do they cover the yellow ones? That's the bottom line. Now, I think there is another poll. Let me see if I quickly run it to see if you're still awake, which kind of is added to this particular topic. So there is a third round, which is the Carbanak and Fin7, that changed substantially the way they changed their mindset on how they. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Let's see if we get some sort of agreement. We've got 34% of the voters. 36. Can we get at least 250?
You missed your vocation, man. You should have been an auctioneer.
42. Come on, guys. 46. 48. Come on. One more. Wake up. 50. All right. Okay. I'm not gonna wait for longer. That's okay. Show the results and also tell you that most of you got it wrong, and that's okay because that's the understanding that we have. Detection has always been there. MITRE ATT&CK has always been about detection. However, this round they realized the importance of protection, and then obviously it's something that is quite changing. They said, okay, it's okay to detect. That's what Michael said at the beginning of our conversation. They said. Vendors and the industry alike and customers realize the protection is also important. It needs to have both. You have to have detection and response, but you also have the protection. So the whole the things they measure also including protection. Impact, they said we can't really measure the impact at the moment. We are documented in attack, but we're not doing an evaluation at the moment. So protection and detection is round 3. Let's see what round 4 brings, which is gonna.
Impact is really subjective as well.
Exactly,
right?
That's I think the challenge.
You can use the exact same technique to breach 2 databases.
Exactly.
And if one of those databases, one of my test databases that I just put junk in, there's no impact.
Yeah.
If the other database is my SAP database, there's a massive impact.
Yeah.
So impact is always very subjective and very difficult to map out because it's dependent on every individual situation.
Yeah, every organization, resources breached, and so on and so forth. But protection, it was the big part that they did. Now, okay. So with that in mind, if you do want to compare products, this is where you go. You go to resources, participant comparison tool, and then you pick, is there a screenshot? Maybe not. Okay. And then you pick vendor A and vendor B. But again, remember, it's not about winning. It's about what techniques do I care most. So do your homework, ask your customer to do your homework first and make sure they understand what do you care. Well, you've got 27 solutions already in your arsenal. If you are looking for a different vendor or a new solution, why are you looking for? Why are you trying to solve? What is the use case? And use case should be mapped into the techniques. And you have that information. Is easier to say, is vendor A better than vendor B for what I need it for? That's the whole bottom line. Other consideration you can do, which are spelled out in the MITRE ATT&CK as well, in MITRE evaluation. First of all, does the solution detect the techniques I need? right now. And then how much of this is out of the box? Because you see there's something called deferred detection or something like that, which means it didn't detect it vendor A, but then I changed the configuration and then it detected it. Or he might wait for the sandbox to come back and then it detected it. That's time, right? So they consider, okay, you detected it the second time or where there was a lag, a delay. Of course, you don't want delays as much as you can. So are there delays in detection because of sandboxing, because of reconfiguration, or there are a lot of things that are missing? So most of the techniques I'm worried about are not detected at all. Maybe the vendor detects brilliantly all the others, but I care about this. So make sure you understand the difference. And then how much of this is automated? Because there's a thing about telemetry and analytics, which are two different things. Telemetry is the act of gathering data. It's just raw data. And I can get a lot of telemetry. But what is the worst nightmare for SOC analysts of any organization nowadays? I can ask it in the chat. What are they bothered about most, analysts? If you want to just drop something in the chat, your idea. In my SOC analyst, what is the thing that might just say, I had enough of this shit, I'm leaving my job, or I just go change the company. What is the amount of information that I'm always overwhelmed with? You can call it, yeah, false positive, correct. Alerts, generally speaking, which might lead to chasing ghosts. Alerts. I've got 100 alerts. Some of them are false positives. I don't know which ones, but I still have to go through my list. And then eventually I just gonna spend a lot of time doing nothing for the organization, chasing ghosts, going to down rabbit holes, false positives. So that's telemetry. I cannot throwing a lot of telemetry at you is not good. If I tell you, look, I created 1,000 alerts for you. Which ones are meaningful? Are you giving more alerts? So analytics is what matters. So you want ideally low telemetry, at least low, things I have to look at, and high analytics. Tell me what matters. Analytics is the search for patterns in the data, and for that you have to have machine learning, artificial intelligence, whatever it is. I want to know what I should be looking for right now. What is really what matters. And then, of course, because they introduced prevention is important. Does your solution also prevent some of these attacks? How many of them? How many are there blocked out of the bat? So they say this is important for a SOC analyst because it saves the day sometimes. So let's introduce the McAfee thing, and then we're gonna go into the demo. So where can McAfee help with the mapping the MITRE attack? We're going to take a look at McAfee CM and Vision EDR only. With Vision Cloud, I'll leave it because I don't think there's time. But there are at least 3 products that I can think of out of my understanding of McAfee that might be have some MITRE attack.
Insights.
Of course, insights. Of course, yeah. Okay, so I remember when you look at the SOC team, they have different needs. And we're going to talk about it a bit in the demo. Tier 1, they call Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. And when they have it, sometimes there's the same guy wearing different hats. Sometimes they don't have a Tier 3. But organization, the big ones have this kind of setup. And they have different needs. Tier 1 gets the events in. So what they need to understand is what is meaningful to follow up. Yeah, thanks for your comments, guys, in the chat. Keep coming. Multiple alerts at the time. So this is the nightmare of tier 1 analyst, a tier 1 analyst. Jesus, I've got another 1,000 events. Which one do I pick? Do I pick in order of time? Severity, perceived severity. What do I do? I don't have enough time in the day, not enough analysts. So I want the ability to have meaningful alerts and following up and understand quickly what's going on. So a quick analysis and the ability to trim down as well if I wanted to. But the summaries, I'm just looking at it. Is it something I have to act on it now? And of course, the tier 2 looks at correlations, details, context, looking maybe including other tools like the CM and other tools inside their investigation to understand whether there are other artifacts we need to add and other context. And then tier 3 is kind of really looking at being more proactive. So tier 3 is like hunting for things without waiting for the alert to happen. So a key element in here is the ability to reconfigure the tool or add new capabilities, which MVision EDR can provide. And it's important because if you have that kind of analyst in your organization, they need that. They need to be able to say, now I know enough, but I know what I'm looking for. I want to be able to modify the tool to add what I'm looking for right now, and without waiting for the vendor to come up with the next patch or whatever. So very quickly for CM, CM has this. They're called content packages, if I'm correct. And if you have McAfee CM content pack, sorry, it's actually written here. You can. There are several, not only for MITRE ATT&CK, but there's also one for MITRE ATT&CK, which allows you to create correlations and dashboards, alerts, and all the things you need in a CM to be meaningful towards a particular use case. And this is the use case for MITRE ATT&CK. So if the organization is using McAfee CM and they want to kind of become a bit more, use MITRE ATT&CK framework more extensively, they can add this content pack from McAfee, which I believe, is it free or is it common cost? I don't remember, Michel. Do you know?
Content pack should be free.
Okay, great. So that's good to know. And these are on the left-hand side, you see what kind of information. Any content pack has that, but this content pack is specifying on MITRE ATT&CK. They have one for DLP, they have several others. This is kind of a very crude screenshot of where I saw a reference to the MITRE ATT&CK in MVision EDR, to my knowledge. Probably there are other places. In the monitoring screen, you can see, and you'll see it in the demo in a second, the technique observed. Remember what the techniques are the how. And in brackets, I believe those are the why. Those are the tactics inside the brackets there. And then you can also see it in other places. There is the investigation screen, which we're going to say in a second. The how do you call it? Machine learning, artificial intelligence. What is the term you use inside the tool to answer the questions?
It's AI-guided investigation.
AI-guided investigation. So basically, there is an intelligence behind it. Crank some numbers, and you see how they can reduce the number of artifacts they're analyzing into key findings. And the key findings.
Don't steal my thunder. Don't steal my thunder now.
All right. Okay. You'll see it in the demo a bit more than in the screenshot. And then also in the alerting screen, you can see a recap. Yeah. So this is kind of some places where you will see. Yeah, I just had to add this. I think is go back to what MITRE ATT&CK says about what is important in an EDR tool, and I think Gartner agrees with the same thing. Right. I think we are 8 minutes ahead of schedule, incredibly enough. So it means that we have more time for the demo, or more time for questions, or we can take 10 minutes of our lives back. We'll see how it goes. Michel,
probably not 10 minutes.
Take the lead.
I like talking, so.
Sorry, there's a question. There are two questions before we jump into the demo. For content packs, you just need to use McAfee Log Agent and allow PowerShell logs. Which is it a statement or a question, Martin?
It's a statement.
It's a statement. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. The other question you have seen that Michel, I'll let you answer this if you can, or Martin can chime in if he knows a bit more about it. Because my last time I looked at McAfee scene was 5 years ago, so I'm not that up to speed with that.
It's a good one because I'm kind of the same as you. I don't specialize in SIEM at all.
Right. Well, it's a good point. He shouldn't. Maybe.
Yeah, I think I'm very much on the threat management. What I would suggest is reach out to your local McAfee contacts and ask to be put in contact with one of the pre-sales guys who specializes in SIEM, and I'm sure they have really good answers and suggestions for that. But I'm not really specialized in SIEM. And if you're familiar with McAfee's portfolio, there's only so much I can know. SIEM is one of those things that I don't know a lot about. I try to avoid SIEM I'm more focused on the endpoint and threat management side of things.
All right, a comment I can make. I know the content parts, at least on my time with McAfee, they would go through upgrades. So make sure you use the latest, but probably something you already checked. I know they do update it every once in a while, but the rest I leave it to the specialist to answer. All right, thanks very much so far, guys, and keep putting in the chat any questions you might have, especially during the demo, because we take a look at that later. So it's all yours, Michael. I see the screen. Am I still in the meeting?
Sorry, I was double muted. My bad.
Oh,
So you
okay.
should see my screen now, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, first of all, yeah, thanks for also from McAfee's side, of course, thanks for being here, and Paolo, thanks for having me. Pleasure working with you, as always. So initially, when we started talking about this, Paolo asked me to do a demo of MVision EDR, and well, that's kind of what we're doing here. The problem with MVision EDR is it's an EDR solution. So it isn't something that you can just show the UI off and go like, oh, look, this is how it looks. Because it's all based around attacks. It's based around information. You need to have data in it in order for it to be really interesting. So one of the other things that we do quite a lot is what I'm going to be doing today for you as well. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be telling you a story. And this story is about me being a junior analyst.
The tier one.
A tier one junior analyst in a company. And I'm leveraging MVision EDR. And what this does, we're still looking at the UI from MVision EDR. I still walk you through everything, but it gives you context. It gives you an idea of how the solution is actually used, and more importantly, how easy it can make a SOC analyst's life. And this is really, really key. And this is all of what I'm going to be showing you is based on an actual attack, right? So that's important to know. It's an attack we created, but it is an actual attack. So the first thing what we need to understand is that on a random Friday, right, I work in Denai Corporation, and I work in SOC, so because I'm an analyst. And on a random Friday, I get a call from John. And John calls me and says like, hey, listen, I can't open my documents. My name is John Butter. It's like, okay. So let's have a look at who John actually is. So John is a senior accountant, and he really, really loves soccer. So every Friday, all of his attention goes towards his favorite team. John has also worked in IT, or at least in a IT environment as an accountant for long enough that he's very anxious about data loss. So every day he backs up his file towards a cloud service. So that's John. Now, a few minutes before John's call to the SOC, MVision EDR picked up a possible threat in the environment. It was low risk, and it's called skygo.exe. And what we see in the monitoring dashboard is, Paolo, can you go on mute? There's a bit of background noise there. Thank you. So we see some different points of view. So first of all, we see threats by ranking on the left-hand side here. So if we have multiple threats, we rank them towards you, which means we prioritize them in terms of severity. We see the techniques observed, and we relate those to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So what we see here, for instance, we see obfuscated files or information, which is defense evasion. We see system owners or user discovery, which is discovery. And those are all part of those MITRE ATT&CK framework techniques or sections, if you would. And lastly, we have process activity, which gives us a very good initial overview. Like, okay, what is actually happening. So I want to stand still a little bit more around that MITRE ATT&CK framework. Right? So the techniques that we've observed for this particular possible threat are related to the MITRE ATT&CK framework matrix. So things like execution, discovery, and defense evasion. And what this does is that these types of classification can really help security teams to better understand the different stages of a threat. And it helps them to communicate across different teams, because everything is related to a standard, so it's understandable for everyone. So now I'm going to look into things a little bit more deeply. And first of all, I'm going to look at the summary view. And it gives me some more information that it started off with SkyGo.exe, and then it kicked off a Who Am I? It kicked off PowerShell and some strange executable that I don't know about. And we can see the process ID, we can see the user account, that's Jay Butter, well, that's the person who rang us, right? And we see the exact time that happened as well. So let's have a look at those three processes. So SkyGo looks like a very common app for a TV provider, right? And it allows you to watch TV online or set up your set-top box remotely if you want to record something. Like most countries have this, right? So fairly straightforward. Who Am I is essentially just a tool found on Microsoft and Linux, and basically provides the name of the logged-in user. And then PowerShell is routinely used in enterprise environments as well. But due to its very powerful functions, it's also popular with bad actors. So let's move to the sequential view now, where we can clearly see that Who Am I and PowerShell are being detonated by SkyGo.exe. So when we look a little bit further, we can see that strange process that we saw, and it's being triggered by SkyGo.exe. Okay, so what do we know about SkyGo.exe? So when I click on this, I can now see a lot more information of SkyGo.exe. So one of the first things I can do is like, okay, well, let's put in the hash in VirusTotal, right? So put the hash in there and see if it comes up with, well, no, okay, it doesn't come up with anything. So it's not known in VirusTotal. Does it mean it's good? No, not necessarily. It just means that we don't know, right? VirusTotal doesn't know and no one else knows. Okay, so let's pause that for a bit and go to PowerShell. So PowerShell has been used to run a script, which is highlighted here on the right. However, don't forget, right, I'm a junior analyst, so I don't know how to read PowerShell scripts. So I'm going to skip that for now. That strange process created a lot of noise. It started off with the Windows registry key, and after that, I can see a trail of file operations. So here we got all of the information of that strange process. You see the registry key, too far. You see the registry key that was created. And what I then see is that there's a file called proc.lib, which was created inside a temporary folder. And that file is interesting because it's created at 10:32, which is a minute after the initial event came up. And it's deleted at 10:33 again. So why should I create and delete a file inside a temporary folder every single minute? That doesn't make any sense. And the last part of the file train that we see here involves the files that John can't access anymore. So it must be related to that. Remember, I'm a junior analyst. I don't know a lot about this stuff, so I need to find out information. And these are the files that John can't access, so there must be something related there. So now I'm going to go to the time view. And the time view within the process activity provides us with a much better view of the time range of the possible incidents. So all of this happened between 10:30 and 10:50 on this Friday morning. And the table view then gives us more information. And here we can now also confirm that that strange process had access to the files that are now corrupted. So that strange process must be related there. So let me take some notes. What have I found out so far? So John Butter rang me and said his documents aren't accessible. He ran skygo.exe from the downloads folder, and then skygo.exe checked the current username, executed a PowerShell, and some strange process. That strange process has a process ID of 13720, and it ran from a temporary folder. It created a file called proc.lib, and it deleted the same file every minute. It's located in the temporary folder, and it accessed the files located in the documents folder of John Butter. So all of this is really suspicious for me. So I think I now know enough to start to open an investigation. And doing that in MVision EDR, it allows me to collect all of the information related to John's machine. And now we can suddenly see, okay, MVision EDR has been able to collect 1,433 artifacts relating to John's machine. And that's that entire galaxy of artifacts that you see here. And in the middle, right there, is John's machine. Now, this is a data visualization, right? You can zoom in, you can filter on this, so don't let it overwhelm you. But this is what you would see normally in a SOC. 1,433 artifacts. However, by leveraging those artificial intelligence dynamic investigation guides, we're now able to reduce this number of artifacts to 577 main artifact ones. So when we compare that to 1,433, that's not so bad, right?
Still a lot.
It's still a lot, but don't forget, this is something that normally a SOC would have to do manually. This is where you get a senior analyst, and he or she will go through all of the data and whittle this down. And not only do we have 577 key artifacts, we have 11 key findings. So we're using artificial intelligence to make sense of the data that we're getting in, and allowing a user of MVision EDR, aka the SOC, to focus on what is important for them, what is the priority, and making that data understandable. So it's a massive time saver from a SOC perspective. Because think how long it would take to do this all manually, and what kind of skills and knowledge would be required for this. It is absolutely massive. So now I have a number of key indicators, which I can then use to focus the rest of my investigation on. So for example, the system has identified a number of hacking tools running on John's machine. And I can see uncommon processes or some sockets being opened by processes who normally don't do that. And those are all really good indicators that something wrong is happening. So on the left-hand side of the guided investigation, MVision EDR can guide me through the questions and answers based on those key findings of the investigation. So let's say we want to look at processes with signs of malicious uses. Right? Okay, I can see PowerShell here. So I know what PowerShell is, but remember, I'm a junior analyst, right? So I didn't know it can be used in a malicious way. So let's take a look at this. So I'm learning from the tool now. I'm not an expert at PowerShell scripting, but if something's malicious is here, it's better to take some notes. For example, right, I can't read a PowerShell script. I can read an IP address. So let me note down this IP address. Okay, next, look at admin or hacking tools running on device. So I see who am I see CMD, I see ipconfig. So maybe I should check with the IT teams to see if there were some operations that Friday morning that would explain those particular processes running. Because I don't see how someone like John Butter, who's a senior accountant, would run a command like who am I? Next up, we're going to look at processes running from suspicious directories. Hey, here's that strange process again. This keeps on coming back into my investigation. And MVision EDR also suggests that there are substrings attached to that, which aren't commonly seen in Windows. Once again, this is all indicating that something wrong, that something is wrong, that something strange is going on here. And the executable path is app data, which is known to be suspicious as well. Okay, so now I'm thinking I need to focus more on that strange process. I've seen it pop up a few times now. The reason John cannot access his files, possibly because of this process. So we need to be able to discover that. So what I'll do then is display the trace of the process. And it allows me to have a much better view of what's happened. So the first thing it did was create a key value. So a key value basically is a way to gain persistence. So why should a piece of software that's living inside a temporary folder have persistence? Doesn't make any sense, right? So this is an important indicator to discover if other machines have been impacted to this as well. So now when we relate this back to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, right, we can now start to communicate with other teams and say, now we can do this in MVision EDR, but say we want to communicate with other teams. Hey, we've seen signs of persistence. And this is the exact registry key that is that indicator of compromise. Makes it understandable for everyone involved. And that is what the MITRE ATT&CK framework does. So I'm going to switch over to real-time search. And here I can drive the investigation into John's computer by using specifics. So I want to know if that key value that I've just discovered is present on other machines. And when I search for that particular key value, okay, I can now see that only Financial 05 has that particular key value, and Financial 05 is John's machine. So I'll make a note of this IP address, and I'll use this later on as well in my investigation. But before I continue, I'm going to delete that key. So if something malicious is going on, I don't want it to happen again in my next reboot, of course. So I'm going to delete the key out of this. So now I'm going to look where else SkyGo is present in the machines in my environment. So not only do I discover now that it's not only on John's machine, it's also on one other machine called HR14. Okay, so I now use real-time search and leverage MVision EDR to tell me the name of the logged-in user that interacted with SkyGo.exe. And I can now see that Mark Bean has interacted with this particular application as well. And Mark Bean is an employee who works in the HR department. So if I then check my AD, for instance, I can see, okay, yeah, this makes sense because Mark Bean is assigned to HR14, that particular machine. That's Mark's machine. Now, are there any files that contain SkyGo in the environment? Because we're now starting to get a feeling, okay, SkyGo is kind of bad. So where is this in my environment? So I'm going to look for that. And I find out that there were multiple files of SkyGo in my environment. And it's skygo.zip and skygo.exe, two different file paths. So let's take some action, right? I'm going to delete those, and I'm going to take some notes now. So what about that strange process? So with the following query within my real-time search, I can see that it's only located on John's machine, but why? A copy of SkyGo was found on 2 machines. So there must be something about John's machine that allowed the process to detonate. So maybe it was the who am I that was related to John's machine. In any case, nothing good is coming from it, right? So I'm going to delete that strange process now. And all of this I can do from MVision EDR. So let's review now what we've discovered. So only 1 machine reported infection. It leveraged PowerShell for malicious uses. We had admin tools running on John's machine this morning, and we have that strange process that's definitely suspicious. There's a Windows registry key related to that process and was found on John's machine, and we've deleted that of John's machine. SkyGo.exe was found on 2 machines, and it was deleted on both those machines as well. And that strange process was found on only John's machine, and we've deleted that as well. So this is where I am now in my investigation, but I want to know more. So what we're missing, however, is the way SkyGo.exe entered the environment. So by correlating our browser history, we discovered that John visited clickforthebest/skygo.zip and downloaded skygo.zip from there. Okay, now we know where it's coming from. But if you remember, we found skygo.exe in both John's machine and Mark in HR. So how did SkyGo jump from one machine to the other? Well, with a very simple query, we can look at the network traffic without having to involve the networking team. I can just do that in MVision EDR. And interestingly, port TCP 445 was used during that time frame. And port 445 is used by SMB. So essentially shared folders. So could it be that John moved a copy of skygo.exe to a shared folder and asked Mark to then run the software? Interestingly enough, when we correlate this, we see that there's traffic between John and Mark's machines that morning that involved port 445. So part of our investigation now is to see if a strange process opened communications through the network. And we can see that from John's machine, there were specific communications to 2 IP addresses, both over port 443 and port 80. So essentially HTTPS and HTTP. Filtering only on port 80, we see that there's a communication every single minute. And we'll do the same for port 443. So we can now see that it's not every minute, but it's regular traffic in the same window of time. So we need to consider this. And I'm focusing on historical search. Under detections and alerts, we can see our strange process in its process ID. Under DNS requests, we can see 2 specific calls by the same process ID. One to the website we discovered earlier, and another one to GitHub. And by analyzing this, we can now overlap the time that the proc.lib file has been created and deleted and the DNS queries. And there's a match. That DNS call is right in the middle of the window of time. So there should be a relationship there. So my final notes now, before handing it over to a senior analyst, would be, okay, John Butter, username jbutter, downloaded skygo.zip, which contains skygo.exe. Files have been downloaded from clickforthebest on that Friday morning, and after execution, SkyGo checked the username and opened a connection to a particular IP address by using PowerShell. After it detonated, that strange process corrupted all the files into documents folder. John copied the file also to a shared folder in Mark's workstation, and at this point Mark ran it from his machine, but the secondary stage did not detonate. And in the second stage of Skydo.exe, John's machine saw continuous connections to both GitHub and Click for the Best. And that strange process created and deleted every minute a file in a temporary folder named proc.lib. So why are those connections there, and what was the role of proc.lib? So right now, I'm going to show you guys exactly what happened. But right now, I would hand it over to a senior analyst to research more. But keep in mind that generally, when you look at a SOC environment, a junior analyst will hand this over to the next tier without all of this information because they don't have the skills and the knowledge to gather this. So MVision EDR actually helps them. And it makes it understandable by leveraging the MITRE framework. And it makes it understandable for other teams as well. So, what actually happened in this technique? Let's see how many, I got 1.5 minutes left. So, I'm going to have 1.5 minutes to talk about this.
You're fine, don't worry.
We have a bit more time, yeah. So, Skygo.exe was a malicious software zipped and hosted on Click for the Best. So once it deployed to John's machine, it tried to open a reverse share to an external IP address, but for some specific reason, it wasn't successful. And there was an error in the code. However, there was a plan B. So Skygo.exe copied itself into a temporary folder, changed its hash and its name. So essentially what it did, it changed itself into that strange process that we saw. It became then persistent, and it checked a remote flag on GitHub. And the role of that particular flag was to remotely orchestrate the attack. So on GitHub, there was also a key to encrypt the documents folder on John's machine. Now remember, that strange process that we saw was copying, was creating and deleting that file proc.lib every minute. So what it was actually doing, it was copying the content of John's clipboard every single 60 seconds. And it's buffering that content into a file called proc.lib and sending that data back to Click for the Best. So once John copied over his credentials for his personal box account into the clipboard, the attacker, via GitHub, turned off the attack by changing a flag, since they had the credentials. And when John copied the file into a shared folder and Mark downloaded and ran it, nothing happened due to who failing and not detecting John Butter as a user. So what we've seen here is a very, very specific targeted attack. That whole fact of encrypting the documents is a red herring. The attackers weren't after that. They don't care. They were after John's credentials for his box account. Trying to find that out with a normal investigation is extremely difficult. So, that is my story. And really what I wanted to demonstrate here is how a junior analyst can leverage a solution like MVision EDR and use that AI-guided investigations in the MITRE ATT&CK framework to not only get a better understanding and learn on the job, but really also to become more efficient. Because, right, IT security is a great job, especially the SOC, if you have a team of 2,000 analysts. However, I've yet to meet a customer with 2,000 analysts in their SOC. So enabling a SOC analyst, whether it's a junior analyst or a senior analyst, to do more with their current resources and with resources with the time and everything, making them more efficient is the ultimate goal. So MVision EDR will help that, but of course, relating back to the topic of this whole webinar. The MITRE ATT&CK framework will help with that as well, because it equalizes the line of communication. It makes sure that everyone involved, if they're familiar with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, knows what you're talking about. So with that, I want to hand it back to Paolo, and we can see what kind of questions there are.
Yeah, look at the questions, Mike. In the meantime, I just want to wrap up with one slide in the interest of time, because there are a few questions that you see. Shall I read it to you?
Yeah, stop sharing so we can have a look now.
Let me see.
Let's see. Okay, so how is the severity defined in order to rank the threats? We leverage the NC entity database. Give me moments here.
Do you want to share something?
Maybe, actually, yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, give me 1 second here. I need to find the correct.
While you're looking, I can just go ahead with the last slide, and then we can wrap it up after with the Q&A.
Yeah, I found it already.
Okay. All right, then. Go ahead.
Open. So Zoom meeting. Let me share my screen there for a moment. Okay, share. So let me know when you're able to find it.
Coming up. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we define what severity it is? It is a really, really good question, right? And it isn't some random thing that we make up. What we do is we leverage what's called the NATO Communications and Information Systems School, so NCISS for this. And this is a mechanism that NATO created to, essentially what they're doing is that they create a mechanism to repeatedly and consistently objectively evaluating risk of a cybersecurity incident.
Mm-hmm.
So NCISS, if you want to go into it, right, there's a lot you can Google for that, but it uses a weighted algorithm to essentially arrive at a score between 0 and 100. And that score then drives the incident triage and escalation processes. And it assists in prioritizing of limited incident response resources where they're necessary. And in order to do that, it aligns with the Cyber Incident Severity Schema, so the CISS. And that's what you see on the right-hand side there, right? And this is what we leverage in order to show priority. So this is an internationally recognized prioritization system that's standardized across the board. Once again, we're trying to go as much as possible into standardization because we realize McAfee isn't the only security vendor out there, and we don't cover the entire portfolio. So when we start to use standardized terms, it's understandable for every single stakeholder within your cybersecurity organization or externally. If you work in the finance world and you're talking a lot with other banks, for instance, you want to share stuff together. So we're using as much as possible, we're using standards that are internationally recognized. So this is how the threat severity is done via the NATO methods.
In case you didn't get it, the colors match. The red, orange.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So level, just to clarify, yeah, level 2 is low. Yeah.
Yeah.
For you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, for NATO, right?
Okay.
For us as well, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. There are a couple of more questions. To be honest, the slides is just a recap of what we covered. I don't really bother. Let's go through the questions, probably more important because I'm conscious of the time. Cool. There is a question: in case of zero-day attack, how would you detect the details? Or how would EDR would detect the details? I think I have the answer, but I'll let you answer that. That is my understanding of it.
One story. 1 second here. So in case of zero-day attack, how would you... So Okay. A solution like MVision EDR, and most, if not all, EDR solutions are aimed towards zero-day attacks, right? Because that's where you need an EDR. If it's a known bad thing, you don't need
Should
EDR.
be blocked already, yeah.
You just need a DAT update. Yes, right? EDR solutions are meant for zero-day attacks or advanced attacks, right? Customized. So the way we would detect it in details is by asking all of those questions. So that is that AI-guided investigation. So things like, are there processes that are communicating externally that don't normally do that, right? Are there hacking tools being used? Are there sockets being opened? Are we seeing things being encrypted that normally don't get encrypted? What we do is we leverage all of those questions that a senior analyst would normally ask themselves, and we leverage that in that dynamic investigation depth. And what I'd like to add here as well is that this is different from a playbook, right? Because the keyword here is dynamic. A playbook is very much a rigid script of if you see this, then this happens, and this, and this, and this. If something is different, then the playbook will become useless. Whereas what we do is we ask questions, and we get an answer. And from that answer, there's more questions flowing out of that. And we keep on asking questions, we keep on answering questions, and keep on then, based on that information, once again, asking more questions. And that is really automating the workflow of the SOC. You still need an analyst in the loop, right? You still need to have people, but it will greatly relieve the load of work that an analyst will need to do. And we do that by simply asking questions. And it sounds very simple. It is really complicated from a backend perspective.
Yeah.
And the reason why senior analysts are so expensive, because it takes a lot of experience and a lot of, you still need a human to make those intuitive leaps, right? MVision EDR, any EDR solution, isn't a magic bullet. It's not something that will solve all of your problems. No, you still need analysts, you still need people, but it will greatly reduce the stress on your people and the workload on your people, so you'll be more effectively able to align your resources.
I think I like to see EDR also in HR too.
Yeah.
So people don't get fed up so quickly. I think the other questions are either for ESN, like I already replied, and the other was replied by Marcus as well. I think we don't have anything else. Until there is any last minute, I think we're done. I'll share.
One more. Does MVision work?
Yeah, if you want to
on-premise?
tackle that one.
Well, MVision EDR, right? The console is in the cloud, but it works both on-premise.
Yeah,
and
I think Marcus already replied that.
Yeah.
Below.
Well, cloud workload is you can use it either with on-premise or with a EPO cloud. Yeah.
I think also important to understand that EDR can work along any protection. Endpoint protection solution you have. It doesn't have to be McAfee, because it's not really is a complement to the protection layer. It's not really sharing. So that's another important part. Yet. What do you mean? Yet? Oh, of course, yeah. And then when it's gonna be, then there's the leverage of it.
It's so I need to be careful here because this is a public webinar, and it is recorded.
There are plans. Let's leave it like this.
The platform approach.
Yeah.
Platform. Let me put it like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So guys, Tom is asking the link. I will send a link with the recording, the slides and the recording to the email addresses that are registered in Zoom. I know most of you use, because everybody's, doesn't want to share details, disposable email addresses, Gmail, I saw it all. I will send it to those ones. Make sure you check them. All right. With that, I think we're done. Thanks very much for minutes over time, but it was worth it. Thanks again, Michael, for your insights and your demo. I think
thanks for having me. Let's make this a regular thing.
Yeah, we will. And at the bottom of the slides there are some reference links you might want to go to find out more. So guys, I don't present it here. Look at the slides at the end of it. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for your appreciation.
And thank you for the global audience, because this is awesome.
That's awesome.
This is really cool. So yeah, perfect.
Thanks very much, guys. I'm closing the session here, and I'll follow up with an email to everybody.
Perfect.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.